Hello everyone and welcome to another Planet Zoo video. Today is gonna be a bit different from what I normally do, but I felt like talking about this topic and I didn't want this to take up valuable time in my Antwerp Zoo recreation videos. From the title of the video, it's pretty obvious what I'll be talking about today. I think the next DLC we'll get from Frontier is a Europe pack, and here's why. First of all, Europe is basically the birthplace of modern zoos. The entire reason we go to zoos today is because European kings, queens, emperors, and basically any guy who wanted to show off kept exotic animals in their garden. Over time, these gardens became public and a place to visit for the bourgeoisie. Once Europe started colonizing continents like Africa and Asia, more exotic animals made their way into these public parks. Eventually, zoos became a place for everyone to visit. A Europack makes sense to me because it would be the perfect way to acknowledge the history of zoos. Sure, we already have like a classical scenery set, but I don't think an expansion on that set, possibly including more zoo themed stuff, is entirely out of the question. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the data mine that happened. If you don't want spoilers, you can skip ahead in the video. I'll make sure to include timestamps for the different topics I'll be talking about. So, this data mine. I was actually in the voice call where all these things were discovered, but I wasn't paying that much attention, and halfway through I went to get dinner, so I didn't catch everything. But our initial thoughts while we were discussing it, we're going to some sort of aquatic pack. There were mentions of mooring posts, which are the posts you see on docks to attach ships to. There are also several mentions of different bridges, including a cantilever bridge, a decorative bridge, and a bridge arch. I admit that cantilever bridges are mostly associated with North America, but there is the fourth bridge in Scotland, which was voted as Scotland's greatest man-made wonder in 2016. And you know, Frontier being a British company, they might like put a reference to that in their game. And I might be going really out of my way here, but the official theme of the Eurovision Song Contest in 2015 was building bridges. If you think about it, Europe is all about building bridges between different countries, different cultures, but also between different continents. Most of Europe's birds migrate south during the winter, hence why many of our native birds are also found in North Africa. The datamine also included more subtle references to Europe, such as gondolas, possibly a reference to Venice, although it could also be the sky gondolas you find in Italian, Swiss, and Austrian ski resorts. Then there's also the marquee. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but it's a type of tent you probably have seen as the setting of the Great British Bake Off. There's a mention of stained glass, plenty of which can be found in Europe's historical churches, and fairy lights have also been found, possibly hinting at a fairy tale theme. Fairy tales, of course, being a recurring aspect of several European cultures. Just think of the Brothers Grimm in Germany, Hans Christian Andersen in Denmark, and Reynard or Renard the Fox in France and the Low Countries. What's more, fairy tales often use animals as main characters, which fits perfectly with a game centered around animals. That being said about the datamine, I will share my personal thoughts on what an animal roster could look like. For this part, I will mostly disregard the datamine, so if you skip that part, rest assured I won't spoil anything major going forward. The next DLC will probably be a scenery pack, given that the Southeast Asian Animal Pack was followed by the African Scenery Pack, followed by another Animal Pack. So that means we'll have 4 habitat animals and 1 exhibit animal. The North American Animal Pack heavily featured animals that were high on the meta wishlist. So it's not improbable that a Europe pack would do the same and take inspiration from what the community actually wants in terms of animals. Certainly if you only have 4 spots to fill. As a company, you want to make your game popular and want to sell many copies of it, and you do that by picking popular animals. On top of that list, in terms of European animals, we have the Prewalski horse. These wild horses once inhabited the vast steppes of Eurasia, but were driven to extinction. That is, until they were reintroduced by zoos who kept and bred these majestic animals. The current range of the Przewalski horse is mostly centered around Mongolia, but more importantly for our Europack is that they can also be found in Russia, Belarus and Ukraine. The ones in Ukraine actually live in the Chernobyl exclusion zone, the area uninhabited by humans after the Chernobyl nuclear power plant disaster. I think these are highly likely to make it into a Europack, not only because they are so highly requested by the community, but also because they tell a story about conservation and the role of zoos in reintroducing animals into the wild. Next on the list is the Eurasian lynx. The Eurasian lynx habitat ranges from northern, central and eastern Europe all the way to Central Asia and Siberia. Alternatively, we could also have the Iberian lynx, another highly requested animal on the meta wish list. Both of these would neatly fit into the pattern of Frontiers DLCs, which has almost always featured a feline in the past. Personally, I think the Eurasian lynx is the most likely one compared to its Iberian cousin because it covers a broader range and could thus also be used in Asian sections in zoos. Now third on the list I would put the red fox. As a canine, again it would fit in with Frontier's previous DLC patterns as they always seem to include either a feline or a canine or both. I think Europe could be one of those instances where they use both. The red fox would of course connect to the medieval fairy tale of Reynard the Fox, or as it is known in its original title, Van den Vos Reynarde. The fairy tale features several stories about a fox named Reynard who tricks other animals to get what he wants. It was very popular in Europe at the time and it is still very popular with children. I will talk more about this fairy tale theme later on in the video when we cover the possible scenery sets. Now for the fourth and last slot for habitat animals, I actually don't have one specific animal in my mind, but several. I could see the Przewalski horse being left out of a Europe pack if it will be included in an endangered species pack, and then of course replaced by any of the following European animals to complete the pack. Among these animals are some obvious ones like the red deer or the alpine ibex as large ungulates that are also high on the meta wish list, but I could also see the European badger making it into the pack, mostly because of it being Britain's largest carnivore. And the Frontier being a British company, I doubt that they would let this one slip. A peculiar but interesting choice for a fourth animal would either be the Dalmatian pelican or the great white pelican. I know the pelican isn't that high on the wish list, but it makes for a great choice and it would actually fit really well with several of the Datamine things. Both pelicans are native to southeastern Europe, which would include that region's representation in the pack. Now for the exhibit animal slot, I think the fire salamander would be a great option. It is high up on the meta wish list for exhibit animals and its range covers a large portion of Europe. It is also one of Europe's largest amphibians and for me it's always the first species I imagine when talking about salamanders. So let's talk about the possible scenery themes that we'll get, as the discoveries in the Datamine consisted mostly of scenery themes or scenery items. My speculation will mostly be based off that, but without going too much into detail. First of all, I think some kind of coastal / aquatic theme could make it into the Europack as an expansion of the aquatic theme we already have. Europe is a continent of seafarers from the ancient Greeks, Vikings and explorers in our history to the port of Rotterdam, Neuhaven and Venice today. Europe of course has several seas and oceans surrounding it, such as the Mediterranean, the North Sea and the Baltic Sea, each one providing a unique growth place for culture and nature alike. A coastal / harbor themed scenery set would allow representation of these three regions and possibly make up for the fact that all three would kind of be left out of the animal roster that I chose. And as I said earlier, it would be a great complement to the pelican, but it could also provide more scenery for already existing animals such as the gray seal, the California sea lion, and maybe even the polar bear and the penguins we have in the game. For the second scenery pack, some sort of fairy tale themed set would make a great addition to the game. I know some people on the forums have shared their opinion about how they don't feel this would fit in a zoo, as it's more a thing you'd associate with theme parks, but I think if Frontier does this right, a lot of people would use these pieces in their builds. I talked earlier about how fairy tales are predominant in European culture, but that leaves the question of how this theme would translate into actual scenery pieces. In a forum post I wrote on the mega thread for the Europe pack, I already made some suggestions on what they could take inspiration from. First of all, Gothic architecture with its iconic arches and windows would make for a great structural part of the set. This would allow us to make more medieval looking buildings, as even though we do already have medieval inspired pieces, I feel like they are severely missing out on the decoration side of things, like windows, arches and doorways. In addition to Gothic architecture, a fairy tale set would also benefit from Art Nouveau. Art Nouveau is an architectural style that was born in Western Europe in the late 19th century, but quickly became popular throughout other parts of Europe. In Germany and Scandinavia, it's known as Reformstil. In the former Austro-Hungarian Empire, it's Secessionstil. In Spain, it's Modernismo. And in Italy, it's known as the Liberty style. All these different translations truly make Art Nouveau a European art style. What makes Art Nouveau the perfect style to go with for a fairy tale theme is the fact that it is heavily inspired by, hence it often uses things like animals and flowers in its design. For this reason, you'll see a lot of Art Nouveau elements creep into historical zoos, such as the Bird Palace at Antwerp Zoo in Belgium or the entrance of the Budapest Zoo in Hungary. Having shapes that are more inspired by the curves you'd see in nature would also allow experienced builders to be more creative and experiment with unconventional shapes. Lastly, I think more zoo-themed scenery could also be a nice addition, as we don't have that many actual items that we could use in, for example, backstage areas. But I actually think that Frontier won't do this for a Europack, and it's probably more likely to be included in an anniversary pack of some sort, along with other highly requested things such as the capybara. In conclusion, I think the Europack is most likely to be the next DLC we get, and I am excited to see what Frontier comes up with and what they'll offer us in terms of animals and scenery items. I could be entirely wrong, of course, and the Datamine could point to something completely different, but I'm pretty confident that we'll eventually get a Europack, and I do hope that some of my ideas will be included in the final product. If you managed to stay till the very end of this video, congratulations. Feel free to share your thoughts on a Europack and my theory regarding such a pack in the comments down below. If you like this video, consider giving it a thumbs up, and if you want to see more of my content, such as my Antwerp Zoo recreation series, please consider subscribing. I hope I see you in the next video. Bye!